I'd like to reiterate the Photoshop to After Effects workflow by creating another animation, a similar animation as we've previously done, but potentially building in a few more animated transformations and a few more layers. This is what we're going to put together in this video. So another kind of surreal composite of imagery from Unsplash compiled together in Photoshop and then animated in After Effects with the potential to output for an Instagram post. Let's just dissect what I've done in Photoshop. I have, first of all, I've got a background layer there. I've got some stars. I've masked out a balloon, a couple of buildings there. I've also got a duplicate of the background copy to create this kind of overlay there, and then finally I've got the hand. There are our elements, nothing too complicated. I'm going to start a new composition and we'll put this guy together. New project. Here's our new project, and we're going to import a PSD to use as a composition. So File, Import, File, we'll navigate. I've called it Surreal Animation 2, and I'm going to import it as a composition, retaining the layers, the layer sizes, and I'm not going to make sure those two options aren't checked. Open that up again and click OK to those settings. So here's our composition here. Double click that composition and you can see our Photoshop layer stack, exactly the same stack as in Photoshop. And we've prepared that stack in Photoshop, and now it's After Effects' task to create some movement. Okay, so let's hide a few things. And I think we'll just start with the stars. Now you can see that my timeline here is set to 10 seconds, and that's because I've previously been working in a composition of 10 seconds. I can change my composition settings by going up to Composition and Composition Settings, changing that duration there. I'm going to work at 25 frames per second. I'm not really sure why I'm working at 25 frames per second. It's just a force of habit as film and television use 25 in Australia. Click OK, just changing that duration to 10 seconds once again. So let's animate this star motif, I suppose. And I've just clicked this little icon here, and that's showing the blending mode. So we can add blending modes exactly the same as we can in Photoshop, and you can see that the stars has a screen blending mode applied to it. Kind of don't really need that that column there at the moment. I don't need to see that, so I'm going to just hide that. Doesn't really matter if that's visible or not. We're going to rotate these stars. So I don't know if you remember, but there are shortcuts to twirl down your transformation properties. You can either twirl down those little arrows, or in the case of rotation, I can hit R on the keyboard and open up my rotation property. I'm going to set 2 keyframes for this rotation, one at the start of the composition and one at the end of the composition's timeline. So we'll start here. I've added that first keyframe. I'm going to move right through to the final frame of my timeline, and I'm going to add a new keyframe by changing this rotation value. So I've got rotations here, and then I've got degrees here, so I could rotate it by 180 degrees, or I could rotate it by one full rotation. Adding that, that value in there is going to cause a keyframe to be created at the end where my timeline indicator is. Now you'll see as I scrub back and forward through the timeline that those stars kind of animating the rotation property. So that's kind of good. What else do we need to do? We'll animate the opacity of that layer, and I'm going to hit T on the keyboard for transparency, I suppose, and at about the 2-second mark I am going to animate the transparency of this layer, the opacity of this layer, from 0. I'll add a keyframe there at 2. The value is 0, and then I'll move my timeline to 3 seconds, and I'm going to change that value to 100%. So now you'll see that it kind of transitions in from 0% opacity to 100% opacity over that 1 second period, from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Excellent. What else have we got here? We've got our balloon, which I forgot to name in my file there, which is bad of me, but if I do hit the return key on the keyboard, I can change the name of that layer there. But I'm going to just bypass the balloon. I'm going to bypass the buildings and go right to the hand up the front there. And we're going to animate the hand in, I think, over 1 second from 0. And it's going to be a position. So I'm going to add a keyframe at 0 and then a keyframe at 1. You can see the values for both those keyframes are the same, so nothing changes. And you'll notice also the order in which I'm adding these keyframes is slightly different to the way I did the opacity and the rotation of the stars. The kind of order in which I'm adding keyframes can vary. Once the keyframes are added, I can change their values. I've just got to make sure that I either have the timeline indicator right above the keyframe that I want to change, like so, and I can change the position. I might bring the hand to the bottom. So the hand is at the bottom on that keyframe, and then the hand moves into the frame at that keyframe at 1 second, causing that animation to occur. And then as we move over to the 2-3 second mark, our stars are animating in. So we've got these kind of transitions happening. I'm going to turn on the BG layer copy there, and that kind of hides the bottom of the stars there behind the hand. So once the hand is animated in, we're going to animate the 2 buildings. So let's turn those on. And we're going to animate the position property. So I'll hit P on the keyboard for both of those layers. I'm going to add a position property for both of them. I'm going to move down to a position property at 1. I'm going to move down to 2 seconds. And I'm going to add another position property there, position keyframe. And then at 2, I'll move these guys down hidden behind those 2 elements. Now it's just holding Shift on the keyboard there, and you'll notice I get a perfectly straight vertical movement. So hand comes in, and now we've got those two buildings that are coming in. I feel like I want to stagger the animation of those two buildings, and I can do that by easily moving the keyframes on the timeline. So I know in the previous example we kind of copy and pasted some keyframes, but this time I'm simply going to select both of those keyframes and drag one set of them along the timeline a little bit. That's going to offset that animation. You can see now that they're offset. Now right at the start there, I've got just a little bit of that graphic hanging over the end there. So I'm going to just, I think it might be this one actually. I'm going to just move that down a little bit more so that it's hidden. And I did that with moving it with the arrow keys on the keyboard. So I can use the move tool, but I can also position things on the canvas with the nudging them with the arrow keys, just like I can in Photoshop and Illustrator. So I think we're doing good here. Hand comes in. We've got those two buildings animating in a kind of offset fashion. And then in comes our rotating stars. And right at about this point, I think it's time for our balloon to make an appearance. And I'm going to do that animation from 3 to about 5 or 6. So let's twirl up all of the properties that we don't need, go down to the balloon, and to start with, I'm going to change the scale. I'm going to bring it down in size a bit so it's kind of hidden behind, so it can be hidden behind those buildings. And I'm going to use the move tool to position them behind those buildings. Alright, now if I want to see two transformation properties at the same time, I can hold the shift key down and add a position property there. So now I'll just hit shift P, and that added position and scale. So what I did there was started off by hitting scale, S on the keyboard, and then if I hold shift P, I can add that position property there. Alternatively, as you know, we can just twirl down and see all of those properties there. I quite like having the kind of minimal elements in the timeline there. So we're going to change the position and the scale over time, moving from 3, adding keyframes at the 3-second mark, and then I'm going to add some more keyframes at the 6-second mark. Firstly, I'm going to change the position of that guy, of the balloon, and I'm also going to change the scale by dragging and scrubbing on those values there. So now you can see that at the 3-second mark, our balloon starts to get bigger, and it also moves off in to the right of our composition. So a problem that's occurred here, we can see that our balloon isn't hidden right at the start, and that kind of messes up our sequencing there. And to fix that up, we can adjust what they call the in and the out points of a particular layer in the timeline. So I'm going to go to the 3-second mark, and this is kind of where we want the balloon animation to start. So right about there where our first keyframes are. If I go to the start of the layer 0 and hover over this part of the layer, I can drag that out to that 3-second mark. So that means that that layer is not going to exist during this part of the animation, or while the playback head is playing over those 3 seconds. So now when I play it, you can see the balloon's hidden or doesn't exist. And then right at this point here, the balloon becomes visible and can animate out over that 6-second period. There's our animation complete. I'll leave it there. We've done some further animation of different transform properties. We've rotated things, we've changed the opacity over time of various elements, and we've put together kind of a transition of all of these elements over this 10-second period. In my finished file, which I'll provide for you, I've actually keyframed these elements to kind of transition out at the end of the 10-second piece, so it creates more of a seamless kind of loop, and you can have a look how I did that in that file. Good luck.